everybody up. All right, so we got an hour. We're going to try and cram through this. My name is Chris Johnson, and this talk is 0 to deployed in 60 minutes with Ruby on Rails. This is taken back trip to the introduction talks a few years ago, but there's always been this problem where now you need all these dependencies and all this other stuff to try and get something deployed. It frustrates a lot of people. So I'm going to try to lower that barrier to entry, and we're going to build a little app here today and get it deployed out, or as best we can with the internet connectivity the way it is. So a little bit about me. Name's Chris Johnson, software engineer with Getty Images. How many people have heard of Getty Images? iStock photo. Yep. So I work on the asset ingestion team. We get videos from around the world imported and back for sale as quick as possible. So I get to play with fun Amazon stuff. So if you're all into the cloud, I like playing with that stuff too. So we should talk about it. Also, author at the Pragmatic Bookshelf. Talk more about that in a second. I also, keep myself busy by part-time teaching at the local community college in Madison, both PHP and Ruby on Rails. So this talk is basically the whole semester class that I teach crammed into 60 minutes. So we're going to move fast. I also do a little bit of consulting on stuff, and you can find me as Johnson CH most places on the internet. A little bit about Getty. We do video, images, audio. You see those pictures on stuff. Share them on Pinterest. Keep the checks coming. Look at people's blog articles. I like to get paid. Shameless plug though too. Next book that I've been working on with a couple of folks that are in attendance here today is out in beta. So pick up a copy of that. It'd be much appreciated if you like my talk. It's a great way to thank me. Tweet us at WebDevRecipes. Like us on Facebook. Share that out to your friends. Even if you don't want to buy it, convince all your friends to buy it, because that would be just as good. So today, what we're going to do, we're going to talk a little bit about some definitions and terms you may have heard kind of poking around this environment. We're going to learn how to set up a development environment, kind of, because the internet's out, but I was going to show some cool cloud stuff. We're going to build an app called Crux, which is a pasty.org clone. We're going to talk about how to deploy it the simple way. And then something profit. Okay. Disclaimer, right? This is not a talk on how to build an enterprise-y application. This is an introduction talk. It's going to get you started, get you pointed in the right direction. Then you're on your own, or follow me somewhere and bother me later. But this is not going to be like, okay, here's how you connect to LDAP and deploy it into your secure infrastructure behind IIS and something crazy that you need to do. This is just going to be get you going, get you the tools set up right. So definitions for today. Cloud IDE. We're going to talk about one called Cloud9. There's another one that I like called Nitrous.io. However, they changed their pricing structure, and the free version only lets you use it for 2 hours a day, which is not really enough time to be productive. But Cloud9 has a nice one. Heroku is a application deployment platform. They cost money after a while, but it makes it really simple, so it's easy to get started and to just try out stuff and get something for someone to look at. Ruby, that is the language we're going to talk about. The language. Ruby and Rails are a language and a framework, not one thing. Rails is not a language. It is a framework for building web applications with the Ruby language. Git is a distributed source control system. How many people have used Git? Everybody knows about that. It's heavily tied into the Ruby development ecosystem, and so it's a good idea to know. You also need it for deployment to Heroku. And then Bundler, is a dependency management system for the Ruby environment. It solves some problems and makes some more headaches. I guess there's no silver bullet in any software development methodology. So it's a tool to help manage your third-party dependencies and libraries and install them in the correct order and the correct versions. So that's the basics. So setting up a development environment. you kind of have these options out there, right? So you have your local machine, you can go and try and get that all set up and follow around, get all the packages, screw something up. Now you can't work. You can create a virtual machine. You're still setting up stuff and doing all this work, and that virtual machine breaks and you're like, I don't know how to fix this. You get frustrated, table flip, and quit doing Rails development. You could use insert new hot provisioning technology, Puppet, Chef, Ansible, whatever the new flavor of the week. Same thing with JavaScript frameworks to build the virtual machine that's replicatable for you. I prefer Puppet, but that's me. You can use that and build one, but you got to learn a whole nother thing on top of just getting developing. So along comes these new cloud IDEs, and they make life a lot simpler to get started, right? They're set up, they're opinionated in the fact that they're set on a Linux environment. They have the software you need installed. They have Git, they have versions of Ruby, the Rails gem, and some other basic gems installed, so you don't have to go through the hoopla of getting stuff set up. The pain that was a few years ago getting started in the Rails development. They've kind of eliminated that. My opinion, it's not a long-term solution, but it's a way to get started, right? I mean, you're not going to dig into something and do it every day and just do it in a browser, editing stuff, I guess unless you like SharePoint and clicking next. But, oh, I thought that would be a good joke. Come on. Okay, so the Cloud9 stuff, I really wanted to show it. We're having network connectivity issues, so you'll have to imagine with this cloud editor, you click a button and start an app. I can't show that because what's going on. So, right, the slide that I skipped over with is let's pick which one for me, right? You determine your level of interest in this, where you're at, how comfortable you are with Unix technologies or just digging around and getting libraries installed on your own. I recommend, if you're just getting started, do the cloud approach. It's a way to get your feet wet and start working with this stuff in a very safe environment. I had a student using it for my PHP class, got into a while loop that was writing to a text file and filled up the machine and crashed it, kept going on. I'm like frustrated for a couple days with doing that, but it wasn't on your local machine. You didn't brick your laptop, so it's kind of a good thing to separate it out. So we're going to build this app called Crux, and here's what it's going to look like, kind of, right? So designer comes to us with this wireframe and says, hey, we want a title for your file, and you're going to put some code in there, and then create it, and then display it back out so that someone else you can send the link to your friend and say, hey, check out this code, and send it along. I know, really original idea, but we're going to show some sweet application programming here. Here's our database model diagram, right? So we're going to have a table. Rails, when it generates new tables to relate with its models, which we'll talk a little bit more, always puts an ID in there, so go to the ID. We're going to create a string field that's a title, text blob to put the code into, and then a slug, so we're not just sending around, this crux 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll give it like a unique thing so it looks like just from GitHub and we look all professional. And then automatically added to each table, unless you take that out, or the created at and updated at, so you can keep track of stuff for metrics. So let's build something, right? That's why everybody's here. Let's look at some code. And if you like these images, the notes will be on GitHub. You can go purchase them from Getty Images. It's the joy of having a large stock library. I also like cars and racing, so if you want to talk about that. So what I'm going to do is terminal up here because the cloud editor is not working. So imagine this is your browser. And you're all kind of excited because it's your sweet browser. But we're going to start off. When you open up a new project in Cloud9, they generate a file structure for you, which is generated in the Rails app. And it creates a bunch of folders and some files for you. We got, let me do it this way. It looks so much nicer in the other view. that still readable for y'all? Back? Okay. So creates a app folder, store the majority of your application code. Config folder, because we all love to configure our applications and set them and tweak them, adjust them. And a database folder, the DB, which keeps track of your changes to your database as far as the schema definition. A lib folder, affectionately also known as a junk drawer, where you can add additional Ruby code to. A little bit more advanced topic than this presentation sets for. Public, and that's just publicly accessible files, JavaScripts that you don't want compiled, or error pages, stuff like that. You can stick in there stuff that doesn't change and isn't dynamic. Vendor is is a folder to put your dependencies in, whether it be JavaScripts, CSS, and then other Ruby libraries, gems in there. So when we get started with this, we kind of look around and we see that it's got a bunch of folders in here. Rails uses the model view controller style architecture. So we have controllers which communicate data between our models and our views. We have views, which is our HTML output for the user to be displayed. And then we have models, which is where we'll put our code that'll interact with our database for us. There's also other folders, assets. So Rails got this crazy new idea a couple versions back that we should version and separate your JavaScript stuff into a folder, and then it should jam it down into one file when you want to deploy, so that you only serve up one JavaScript file or one CSS file, right? I mean, saves time downloading for the user. That can be cached in their browser. So there's this assets folder up here, and anything you put in there, we can configure to have compressed down into one, and it just organizes things a little bit more than throwing everything in public and kind of just like, what CSS file do I need to reference and where? It takes care of that for you. So let's actually build something cool, because if we start it up right now, I'm going to start my server up with a bundle exec Rails S. Now, to explain that command a little bit more, bundle is back to bundler, and exec says, in the context of your current bundler configuration, start Rails. What's going on there is you have a file called a gem file, and this is lovely configuration. This is what bundler tells us the gems that we want loaded in our application when we start it up. So only load these third-party dependencies that we've specified at the particular versions. So it helps keep everything sandboxed by using that bundle exec prefix. So everything is only running in the context that you've specified those gems to be there. So we can, the project generated, we can start up our server, and we can pull that up in the browser. And whoo! The browser is not on the right window. There's our exciting application, right? Got something started. We're done. Let's just ship it profit. That's a startup, right? I mean, go like that. So that's cool. Yep, everything's working. But we kind of want to, get it styled up a little bit and add our wireframe stuff. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to cheat and grab some stuff out of my notes here. So we're going to use a theme, and I think I got it loaded beforehand from this cool site called Bootswatch. They have a bunch of free Bootstrap templates. They're nothing spectacular, but they have a bunch of them, and they're free to use, and so why not? They give you some style sheets to download here, and it's loaded up in memory and just showed that file. So what I'm going to do is grab the contents out of that. I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to go back to my terminal here, and I'm going to go up in my assets folder, and I want to create a new style sheet. This application style sheet is the one I was mentioning before that keeps track of all the style sheets that you're wanting to reference and you want jammed into the one file afterwards. Do not add to this file. I think it tells you like 3 times in here to not do that. You add other than requiring which files you want to be included. But do not just paste your style sheets in there. So let's add a theme CSS file. So I pasted that in there. This is typical CSS. Everybody's seen that. So we add our theme in there. That's good. But you probably want to display a page, right? You're going to have something up. So let's go ahead and use some of the built-in functions of Rails that allow you to do some code generation. This is great for speeding your process up and getting going, but like anything, code generation can get you kind of, left in the dust later if you're looking through all your code and all it was generated and you're like, what do I take out, what do I add to? But it's really handy for getting started. So what we're going to do is do a bundle exec, so make sure we're in our right context. Rails generate controller static pages index and about. What we're doing here is we're saying, hey, I want a new controller, so I want to be able to handle routes coming in called static pages, and I want to create 2 new endpoints, 2 pages, index and about. And we can see up here in the create, it created 2 files in our view for us, our view folder. There's a static pages folder and then the index and about, so it's segregated right down. And that is our HTML files with that funky ERB extension on there. The ERB extension is the Ruby templating language that allows us to interpolate Ruby into our HTML, just like you would do with PHP or ASP or any of that other stuff where you're actually mucking some dynamic stuff in your HTML. There is other support for other templating languages in Rails if you're familiar with Haml or Slim and different other frameworks too. So anyway, those 2 files are generated. Next, we're going to go ahead and configure our default page to be that index file so we get something to see right away. With the controllers that handle and determine which model and view to kind of link up and get data to, we have a routes file down in our config which actually says, hey request, when you're coming in, send it someplace. And when we generated our controllers, you see on lines 2 and 4 there that we have routes to get requests for static pages index and static pages about. So we can get directly to those. But what I want to do is actually add it so that when it comes to slash, we go take people right to our index page. So we're going to say the root path and static pages index. So this is going to say any requests come in, take the static pages controller and the index action. So let's look at what that code actually does. We go to our controllers and the static pages controller. We have 2 Ruby methods, index and about. These are referred to as actions, and right now they're just there. They don't do anything. They're just empty. Automatically, the view associated with that index action gets called and rendered. So we get this other file down here in the bottom where it's going to have an h1 find me in there. So when we come to our site, we reload our server for good measure. Pull up our application here. Woohoo! We got our fancy new page. We're done, right? No? Ship it? Is that enough to to go. Do I get angel investments now with this? Okay, so we got that, and let's add some design to it to make it look a little bit cleaner. We're going to add it to our layout file here, and again, I am cheating with some snippets of code because no one wants to watch me type a whole bunch of HTML. This is a layout file. It's called the application ERB file, and what this does is allows us to pull any of those other pages in, and we render the content here in this yield block. And so we can give our site a consistent feel without having to add includes and stuff on every page and try and figure out where we are, or go and style every single page to look the same. So I'm going to replace the body section here with some boilerplate bootstrap code. And so we got just a navigation container and footer down here, and still our yield block down in here, so we can spit out the stuff. So let's save that. Looking better. We got our crux. We got our company name. You scribble. That was going to be a great joke because there's a random startup name generator site, and it's really funny. And when I have this code will be posted on GitHub, so go check it out. It's kind of funny. You scribble was one, so I named this fictional startup here, but without our internet. Can't show it. So cool. We got our layout. Nothing fancy yet. Let's go ahead and add a little bit more style to our home page here. So that static pages stuff just kind of got to go. Grab another piece of snippet of code because this is also known as Stack Overflow driven development, where I just copy and paste the code I found and then refresh your page and pray, and hey, it works. So we got a big jumbo thing in here that says, paste your stuffs. And so that's great. We can put that out and sign up, have users sign up for the beta in 6 months when we launch. Well, so we should probably keep moving right along in our 6-month adventure here. And let's add our first real feature to it. And the way we're going to do is we're going to take advantage again of a code generator. And like I said, later when you get really good at Ruby on Rails, you don't use generators for generating code. You write the files out. But they're very handy for proof of concepts, getting stuff out the door, show your boss this new awesome pasty thing, or deploying it to your intranet so you can say, hey, we can share a code and legal department doesn't get mad at us for posting it on the internet. Or like the guy that pushed up his Amazon account credentials to GitHub and his account got rang up with a ton of bills. Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a generator again. This time we're going to use one called the scaffold generator. And this is going to generate the whole shebang for us. It's going to generate a controller, a model, a file called a migration, which is going to actually turn our database into what we want it to be, and the view with a form, all the views with form and form fields that match what we're passing in here. And that's our title as a string, our code as a text box, and our slug as a string. And you're going to see in a minute why the generator kind of is a pain. We're going to have this slug in there. It's going to put a form field in, and it's going to display it just on the page. We don't want that when the actual user is using it, so we're going to have to go and clean up what the generator does, all to get the the slug added to our database. But it's going to go through and generate a crap ton of files for us again, because that's what generators do, right? Let's take a look at those. Nope, wrong window. Close out some stuff here. So the first thing we want to talk about is our migration. So there's a folder here called migrate, and then inside of it are time-stamped files. And that is to keep track of the state of your database. So when you run migrations, it goes and finds ones that haven't been run, and it runs them. And it goes through and does whatever you say to do in them. In this case, we're going to create a table called pastes. We're going to set a column that's a string of title, a text column of code, and another string of slug, and then our timestamps are here. So this is going to actually create that in the database for us, so we don't have to write SQL, update the database, go find the DBA to run the SQL script. We're just going to do it on our own, John Wayne style, and cowboy it up. So let's do that. So we're going to do a bundle exec rake db migrate. So rake, new command, and I did something wrong. Live coding demos. Oh, hey. I need to remove the SQLite database first. See, I did this code beforehand too, so I know what I was doing. So, bundle exec rake db, it's wrapped :migrate, and that's executing what's called a rake task, which is Ruby and make together. So it's like the Linux make command to execute and build things, but the Ruby version. And it's just saying there's a task out there for db migrate, so hey, find all the migrations, run them, and add the stuff to the database, delete the stuff, rename columns, whatever you want to do. And you can see in the output that it created the table, paste, and then it finished doing stuff to it. It kind of outputs what's going on. So with that, we actually have a working application we can show here. So when our boss comes over and it's half an hour into the day, we're like, how's that app coming? And you're like, cool. So I got this front page up, and then we can go to /pastes, and we can add our food.md. So I'm hungry. That's what you all are thinking. And we still have our crazy thing that we can add a slug there. You say, hey, yep, so cool, I got this done, ship it, right? Nope. Looks great. And then this is where a lot of the tutorials with Ruby on Rails kind of leave off, right? You get this, and you're like, hey, yep, so you made some stuff. You can create, edit, and you can edit your food MD to just starving, and save it. Here, it's all there, and then you can delete it. It's got all that fancy stuff in there, but that's not real world. So let's go ahead and clean that up a little bit. And so the first thing we're going to do with that is we want to get our form to look like our wireframe. So remember, our wireframe had just the title and the code and the create button on it. We want to get rid of that slug thing out of there, and make it bigger and all fancy schmancy, all Web 2.3 or whatever we're on. And so let's steal some HTML for that and look at these forms. Remember to hop back over here. So we're in our app, views, our paste, and we're going to look at this form. And when we look at the folder here for our paste, we have a lot of different files in here. Again, code generation generates everything you'll need, right? So we have a form which is included in our edit and new, so that we can use the same form over again for editing and creating new pastes. It also has our index, which would be just a table list of our pastes. We'll get rid of that. It's got a JSON file, so we can actually build right out of the box. It's got a JSON endpoint that someone could hit and start grabbing all of our stuff. And then same thing for our show, so they could grab the results and we can specify what comes back to them as a JSON blob. So we're going to modify our form, and one of the cool things here is you get some little tags here, and this is our start to look at ERB. So we get our fancy little less than percent equals, and then at the end our percent greater than. You know, everybody loves putting some tags in their files. Those old PHP and ASP devs can't let it go. But there's no semicolons, so be happy about that. So what this is doing is it's using Ruby to generate the form for us and taking advantage of the object and saying, hey, paste object, I want to generate a form of you, so determining the context where it's at, generate the right type of form, whether it be a post to create or a put to update. And then go down, hey, if there's any errors on new object, spit out some error messages. And then jump down and actually see our fields. And this is one of the things I love. These helpers here for in the current context, the current object, print me a label for title and a text field for title. I hate typing input equals text, name equals blah. So that's a lot shorter for me and a lot more, a lot handier because I can never remember the full HTML syntax. Mainly I'm lazy. And so with each one of these, we get, and they're linked together by what's called a symbol. And again, this is your crash course on both the Ruby language and the Rails framework. And we have 29 minutes left to finish it all. So keep moving along here. They're all pretty similar. You notice that text is text area, so it's giving us the bigger thing. We have slug, and then we have a submit button down here. And now I'm going to put in some styled up code. And this is just taking advantage of the styling from Bootstrap and giving us a nice little look here. So refresh this page. Now we got our big form. That looks good. But we got some stuff to get rid of here. We're going to want to get rid of this new paste, right? And then get rid of our slug. So let's go and take care of those. So we styled up our form. And we're going to drop the slug stuff. And then we're going to want to get rid of that big new paste thing at the top here. New paste, because our users don't care that it's paste. They want a new crux. And so we're in the new action, our URL up here. We're going to go find that page. And we got a new page here. And we can see that that's just pulling in the form. It's using some black magic to find the file name without the underscore on it. It's got the new paste, and it's got a link back to our paste path. And that looks really goofy, right? I mean, what the heck is going on there? Well, link to is a Rails function that takes the value of what you want the link to say, and then the location of it. This paste path is a helper that actually looks at our routes file and determines what actual route to go to. So we can just say paste, and we don't have to remember it's /paste/ to go to the index or wherever we define it to be. It takes advantage of that and builds this link up for you. But we're going to get rid of it because I hate extra code, and we just want our new form to be nice and clean, a new crux, and it's got the paste. Create the paste down here. We could change that to something a little bit more friendly too. This will be live coding. And go here. I think it's create. Should be some that's not what I was thinking. We'll skip that for now. So we got our wireframe to look like everything's going on. Now, right now when people come to our site and we need to get them to this form, right? So we come to the site and go, hey, we got to get you to that form, because how are they going to remember to go to /paste and new and try to create something? So what we're going to do is, one, getting ahead of myself a little bit, let's get rid of this paste index thing, right? I mean, we don't necessarily want to list them all out. Maybe you do, but I'm the founder of this startup, so I'm going to say we don't want to list out all the pastes that have happened there. It's not really useful. We're going to send people to individual ones. It's just kind of a one and done thing. So let's go get rid of that first. To do that, we're going to go and play in our controllers a little bit here and look at them. So we have an action for each one of our controller actions. So it tells us here, scaffolds out, generates comments in there to say, hey, this is the get request to index or get paste, and this is what's returned. It actually goes and finds all of them to spit them out. Here's a show where we're just getting to that one specific paste by the ID. And then we have our new and our edit and our create. So new ends up posting to create, and edit ends up patching or putting. I realized that in Rails 4.1 they added the patch method. I know the difference is the amount of data that's supposed to be sent along, but I'm not quite sure what their methodology behind changing it over to patch is, except to be all cool and use something new. And then there's a HTTP delete method that gets used to destroy stuff. So let's change our index action. Instead of getting all the pastes, we're going to mimic what happens in the new action and then render the new action. So that's going to do is say, hey, if someone comes to that index, we're just going to actually show them all the new stuff. We won't make it redirect and put the new / on there, so they get a little bit cleaner interface here. So now when we refresh this page, we get taken right to a new crux. And that's cool. Next thing we should probably do is get that slug stuff figured out, right? We want to put a slug up in the URL, so when we send a link to our friends and say, go to blah, 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 they get this nice, slugged URL and not just a number. So we're going to hop back into our code here, and we're going to take a look at our models, right? Interacting with the database. Now, this is where advanced Rails and Rubyists would say, don't put this code in here, because model should be stuck to just working with the database, and you should separate out any workflow stuff into a command architecture or something else. But we're going to violate that and jam it in there because it's our first application. I'm sure a lot of you have probably used command style, command pattern in different applications you've built. I said it's a little bit more way to go. We're going to take advantage of some built-in stuff to the active record database interaction, and we have the ability to have what's called callbacks. And those are actions that happen anytime this object is worked with. And there's one called before create. So every time before something is actually created and stored to the database, we're going to run a method. And we're going to call that method generate slug. We're going to make it a private method so that it's down in our code, and our model should be the only thing that interacts with it. I'm going to create a new method here called generate slug and go take the code for that. And grab that here. So what we're doing is we are assigning at the current time self, which is the object we're working on, the slug property of it, a secure random URL space encoded 64 string. Just a bunch of junk to put on there and try and be random. And so we're going to save that every time. So we're not going to let the user generate their slug. We're just going to save this random string for them. So we'll save that random string, and let's take a look at what happens here. So I should restart my server here quick, just to make sure that it picks up all my changes. And we're going to run when you get zombies. We're going to create a paste, and we can see that this slug is generated for us. I get this nice random thing. Let's style this page up because this looks like junk too, right? I mean, if somebody puts a code in there, it's a lot formatted, it's going to look all wonky. It's a technical term, wonky. So that happens in the show, right? So you're viewing a single object, you're showing it. So we got this page, and it's got stuff in there. For one, we don't want the slug to show up. And title, we probably don't need to preface it, so we can just put it inside of here, use their styling. And then our code, let's put that in a pre-block, because if we're really ambitious, we could use some JavaScript to do some highlighting based on the type. It is, but I'm not that ambitious. And then again, we're going to get rid of these edit and back links so that we don't show those up to our users. We can refresh here and see our new fancy style. Yeah, it's spitting out there. Looks good. But we got the last thing to take care of, right? We have that URL. It shows up as paste2, but we want to have it be paste in the slug to show up in there. So we're going to hop into our controller here. Find my mouse. In our paste controller. And what we're going to do is look at what happens after our create. So after the create happens, there's a save action or save method here on the paste where it's going to save the database. And if that's okay, it's going to do something. If it's HTML, it's going to redirect it to the objects page and say it was successfully created. Or with JSON, it's just going to return that JSON back for them. So we're going to change our redirect to paste path, and we're going to override the ID that's being sent along, and that is going to be our @paste.slug, so that we can go ahead and we'll get that to come back. And then we're going to do a little bit more modification. In Rails 4, they added this concept called strong parameters down here. And what it does is just permit specific fields to come through. I mean, this is a common practice. You don't take data from places you don't know what's going on, right? You only let what form fields you expect to come through. So they added this, a little bit of code to only permit certain things to come through with your requests, kind of lump it into one place. And they were doing that, they said, hey, let's go ahead and take advantage of this pattern, and anytime one of our actions needs to find a paste from the database and set it to an instance variable, we're just going to find it based on the ID. Well, the ID is going to be now the slug, and we want to find it by the slug. So we're just going to change the type of find to be a find by slug. So we'll specify that we're going to do it by the slug, and that's the params ID that it pulls out of the query string. So, if I remembered everything, go back here, create our works first time.rv, def works first time, because everything works the first time, right? What's out? So, create paste. We get our code spit out. We get our slug at the top. And away we go. We're ready to ship it now. So Heroku comes in. And we don't have Wi-Fi, so we get to show what it would do. There is a few commands, and I'm going to add another follow-up screencast after this with these things. Heroku is I can spell it. Heroku, you would like to be able to see that code too. Heroku is a hosting platform, hosting service that specializes in simplifying your deployment process. And the way they work is you would use their command line app, which in the cloud IDs is actually installed in the ones that I've played with. And you do a Heroku create, and then it asks you for your username and password, and then it creates an application for you. And it creates by just pushing up a Git repository there. And then you just push to that Git repository to deploy your application. And voila, you have something out there. And I can't really show that in an offline way. But it would actually deploy the application for you. It runs. I think the note about Heroku is, rumor is they're changing their pricing structure so that your app will only be able to run for a few hours a day for free, which they used to let your app run just at a smaller scale all the time, but evidently giving away stuff is not a good business model. But so when it works for proof of concept, get something out there, it takes the headache out of having to build a server and figure out how you want to configure it and deploy to that. And it's the simplest way to go. So to jump back here, hit our deploying, and then our final step is profit. I want to leave a few minutes here for any questions, actually. Does anybody have any questions? We have about 10 or so minutes here. Or are you overwhelmed with content? Yeah.
What are you what can you target with websites or?
Yeah, when you're using the Rails framework, yeah, you're building websites. Using the Ruby language, you can build anything. I built our deployment tooling all in Ruby that spins up stacks in Amazon land and configures them. So you can use that. There's also a framework called Shoes for building desktop applications. And then a new tool from some folks that is called Traveling Ruby that actually packages up your Ruby runtime and your app into an executable for distribution on, I think, Windows, Linux, and Mac, all three. So you can, sky's kind of the limit there. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
Running those commands, is that just like a regular terminal window?
Yeah, and in the cloud editors, you get a code window, you get a file explorer, and then at the bottom you get a terminal to run, and it's in the context of your application.
So that was all that cloud ID.
Yeah, that was the Cloud 9. And I missed putting in this. There's a railstutorial.org. There's a book by Michael Hartle that uses Cloud 9, walks through building an application, talks about testing, which we really didn't have time to talk about today. But it takes a little bit to get through that book. It's free to read online, and my students use it too. You could also bother, I'll pick on Brian, he's got a cookbook book written out there that gets you to if you want another resource to learn this stuff.
Easy to go bug Brian.
Railstutorial.org, all one?
All one word, all lowercase, yes.
Okay.
It's by Michael Hartle. Any other questions? So either I did really good, or you all have minds
All right,
swollen, or you're
I'm gonna
hungry.
throw a question at you.
Okay.
Just, could you bring up the code in the model where you saved the slug?
Yes.
How does that actually work? How does that actually save the slug? We're just setting something. How does that actually get saved to the database?
Yes. So we set the slug here. This happens before it's created. The object is then modified, and then it is modified at the point in our controller in the create action here. It is modified about, if you were to here, as after the new's been done, it's modified there, and then it's persisted here with the save. So the callback happens during this period in between here, if I were to kind of visually spit it out of what's going on. Any other questions, comments, bad jokes? No? All right. Well, just want to thank everybody and shamelessly plug my book again, Web Development Recipes 2. And go pick a copy of that up. And I would love to hear your feedback on Twitter or infrequently my blog. I'll tweet after I get this up on YouTube, and next week probably have a follow-up with the actual cloud stuff so you can see the difference there when I have internet connectivity. So thank you for your time, and enjoy lunch.